Good evening. Here you have Nick Newman, cartoonist, and Ian Hislop, editor of Private Eye, which is dead heating with the National Theatre having a 50th anniversary this year. Applause, please. That is Nick Newman's hand scribbling away there. It's amazing that he's got this third hand. You can stop it now, you can stop it.
Yes, we've had enough of him.
Gone, right. You see, that's the kind of thing editors say. I am Libby Purvis. I'm a lifelong cartoon addict and a Private Eye early adopter. I was 13. You weren't born, were you?
No.
Were you born, Nick?
No.
God, this is
So
terrible.
that's the gallantry out the way.
We've got a whole set of cartoons to show you and to discuss what it's all about and how important the cartoon has been in the noble history of Private Eye. I think we just ought very briefly to sort of set ourselves in this historical, respectable perspective, since we are at the National Theatre, by show us something very early.
This is a cartoon drawn by Willie Rushton in the very first issue of the magazine, and it says, "Lloyd George knew my mother." So that sort of set the tone for the cartoons from then on.
Yes, sexual shenanigans,
yes,
no
yes.
proper respect for politicians. It's kind of Boris knew my mother now, isn't it? It's kind of you can recycle that one.
The hair's quite similar too, isn't it?
Anything else from that very, very early moment?
Very quickly, once in the early days, Willie Rushton basically did almost all the cartoons for the magazine, and very soon there were émigrés from Punch and the Spectator coming on board and joining the team. And one of the first was Gerald Scarfe, who was then working for Punch and doing very, very traditional cartoons of desert islands and men on window ledges and all that sort of thing, which you wouldn't associate with Scarfe now. But Willie Rushton was the person who said, you should try caricature. And it sort of changed Scarfe's life. And that's...
So here he is with Lyndon Johnson, sucking up to him. And of course, we have there is a modern equivalent, isn't there? There was one of...
Indeed. And this is, I mean, that cartoon has... Harold Wilson, and the tongue was edited out by Richard Ingrams.
It was a terrific prude, Richard.
Unlike this one, which was that your...
That was me.
Which shows how taste has changed over the years. But
now, that's our political credibility now established. But what I have been delighted about in this wonderful book, which we shall be forcing you to come and buy signed copies of afterwards, is that there's such a strong emphasis on the gag cartoon. I mean, Ian, political cartoons kind of have it all their own way, don't they? They have big retrospectives and they're considered important.
Yes, and they get more space and they do the caricature and people think, well, that's proper humour. And often it's not very funny. You often notice in newspapers there's a big cartoon with Ed Miliband and the trade unions, and you go, that's so true. But you don't actually laugh at all. Nick, right, when we were younger, used to call them chin strokers.
Whereas something like that.
If anyone can't read captions, just shout. Our tap's been phoned.
Which is drawn by Neil Bennett, who was a teacher for until about the age of 45, and then packed it in to become a cartoonist. So it's never too late to start. Quite a few of them do that. My friend Bill Stott did that as well. I think teachers probably do a lot of scribbling while they're invigilating, don't they? Goes on.
The great thing about the gag cartoons is they are just timeless. So in any retrospective, and a lot of this book, you find it's just brilliant one-off jokes that aren't really about anything in particular, or about everything. But the satirical stuff tends to date. Whereas if you've got, just a straight-up joke.
Give us the hedgehog. Give us the hedgehog.
Yeah. Well, you can't do much better than Ed McLaughlin. And this is, following on from the 60s, the style of jokes became much more surreal, and it sort of coincided with Monty Python and whatever. But Ed McLaughlin specialised in giant animals, rabbits rampaging through through the town. There's a fantastic one he did of the cricket, of the oval cricket ground, and it's beautifully drawn, incredibly detailed. He draws enormous cartoons. And there's Brian Johnston in the background saying, oh, and play's been suspended because of movement behind the bowler's arm. And there's a giant Tyrannosaurus Rex rampaging through, eating buildings.
Leave that up for a minute, because I think this kind of crushing theme might rather come up. So I want to talk to the pair of you about the relationship between editor and cartoonist, because there is a most heartfelt introduction to this book about that.
Is that a whinge, is what you're saying?
The word whinge does come into it. I mean, Ian, how many cartoons do people submit to you in a working day?
Oh, hundreds. I mean, there are huge amounts of cartoons come in, and there's a really, for the cartoonist, just a depressing pile of cartoons in my in tray. Whereas, as editor, I love going through the cartoons. I love discovering a cartoonist or just laughing at the joke. But the end of the process is me writing a note saying, sorry, no thanks. And somewhere in Britain, popping through the door week after week, is my cheery note saying, nope, not funny, no thanks.
And yet you are one of the big users of cartoons. I mean, how many go in an edition normally?
About between 25 and 30, which, you know, as a hit rate, isn't very high. I mean, and I'm using more than most people. But I think from the other end, it fosters, I mean, this is nothing personal about Nick, but the sort of rather depressive, bitter...
I mean, if anybody's met a group of cartoonists, we do moan a lot about everything. And I think it's one of the things that defines you as a cartoonist, if you can handle a lot of rejection, because it sort of goes through everything. Even if you're getting stuff accepted, you're putting in maybe 6 rough ideas, and if you're very lucky, Ian will take 1. And you're left feeling, well, what was wrong with the other 5? And people get very, very fed up with the
to be a generator of jokes, a generator of gags, is a really curious life, isn't it?
Well, it's a very solitary existence, and a lot of the cartoonists, we never meet each other, so sort of an event like this, you know, maybe somebody will turn up and we'll sort of see you.
You see, this is when it gets dull, isn't it? Put a gag up.
Well, one of the things that has changed, this is... one of the things that has come across from doing the book is that you get a real sense of fashions changing, and from the 60s and 70s. And I mean, today, most of the cartoonists, every batch sends in cartoonists send in something about obesity, something about tattoos.
But the brilliant thing about Michael Heath, who's, you know, been cartooning all the way along.
That's one of the other...
This brings us...
Oh, dear.
Hallelujah. This brings us to a topic I was going to come to a bit later, when I'd softened you up a bit, which is a question of taste.
Yes.
Ian, tell me about your parameters of taste.
Well, as you can see, I'm pretty strict on taste. Now, that cartoon I did think was incredibly funny, so I put in, and a lot of people complained about it. And it came shortly after a French magazine called Charlie Hebdo had put some cartoons about Islamic preachers on the front cover, and they'd been burnt down. So I thought what would be really brave would be attacking the C of E.
They do have a lot of candles.
And, you know, the militant wing is pretty stroppy-ish.
But here's another appalling taste cartoon. But it's... That's by the late, great Tony Reeve, who died a couple of years ago. But
I would defend that.
I would defend that because there were so many news stories going around about very, very young pregnancies.
There are, and we do get letters of objection. I mean, the readers are not slow to tell you that they're furious about jokes, and sometimes the news agents as well. We did a joke with a Muller talking to a little boy saying, "What will you do if you blow up?" We had a certain circulation of expats in the Middle East, which we now no longer have.
Yes, I mean, but it seems to be an interesting, let's leave that one there for a moment, because it seems an interesting sort of philosophical question, in that you have to have a line you draw. You're the editor, you've got a magazine, you mustn't sort of go bust, you mustn't alienate everyone, plus you're actually, I'm outing him now, is a good Christian man, you see, and he's quite moral in himself. So you have to
This is libelous.
but you have to have lines you draw, and you do have lines you draw, don't you? There must be some in that
My
pile of
bottom
rejects.
line is I have to be able to defend it. I have to be able to justify the joke to myself, if to no one else. At a certain point, I have to think, it's okay to say that because that's an issue which needs saying all that. For the cartoonists, I think they just bung it my way and say, well, you'll get the letters.
Well, that's what I was going to say to Nick. It's actually, in a sense, it's almost important.
And
That's a Newman.
That's very bad taste.
Well, there you are, getting the hand clap.
Yeah.
But the thing is, but Nick, yourself, speaking for the cartoonists, presumably it's quite important in the creative inward process of making cartoons that you don't have any sense of taste, that you just let any awful joke out, as we might in the privacy of our own homes, a bit of black humour.
I think cartoonists on the whole have no moral compass whatsoever. It's, I mean, you just don't, one of my problems is I just don't know what is funny, really. I mean, I sort of have a sense of it might be funny, but it's sort of, I leave it to others to, you know, we tackle difficult subjects. I mean, the day after Diana died, we went to press, and you sort of felt you had to do something about it. And I did this cartoon, which sort of, it's not tasteless, but we had to sort of print it with a little form for cancelling your subscription in the same issue.
You see, but I have no problem with that. Nor did I have a problem with the cover, which again, I mean, the cover was actually withdrawn because it showed some crowds outside Buckingham Palace with someone saying the papers are being appalling, and someone else saying, yeah, I couldn't get hold of one anyway. Right. And it was an attempt to suggest that the general public was complicit in some of this intrusiveness. But you do have to watch it, I mean, because we do get magazines just withdrawn completely. We had a picture of the Pope giving a sermon saying, I remember the days when boys used to enter the priesthood. Not on sale in Ireland.
Yes, and there are commercial decisions to be made there, aren't there?
There are, but I do try to sort of address the commerce afterwards.
The interesting thing is, I mean, one joke which I've forgotten whether it was a cartoon or whether it's just something somebody said was, well, at least, you know, with Afghanistan and Iraq, we're going to have a damn good Paralympic team and all these fit young men. And in fact, there was a lot of hissing and booing about that, but we did.
Yep. And it was true.
Yes,
I mean, and that's...
There was a horrible truth in it.
I think that's okay, and I think the laughter there is a mechanism of saying that's true.
I mean, here's a cartoon...
Oh, no, this is a very significant one, yes. Explain.
Which, I mean, it was your decision to put that in. It cost rather a lot of money, didn't it? It's Robert Maxwell and Neil Kinnock, and it was called His Master's Voice.
And yes, I mean, what you find out as an editor is that people object to things you run about them as stories, but they really hate being laughed at by a cartoonist. And Robert Maxwell, we'd run a number of stories suggesting he was stealing from his own pension fund and just awful stuff. Obviously all true. And then we'd run a piece saying that he'd wanted to get a knighthood. And there's the leader of the Labour Party. And we'd said essentially that Kinnock was doing whatever Maxwell said. And Maxwell thought this was an appalling libel. And so this was a rare example of a cartoon being sued. And it came up in the court case, which is marvellous, because the judge had to put up some sort of videophonic device in order to show, like this, in order to show it to the jury, who then laughed.
Yes. But do you think that did... Do you think that did actually damage your case?
Yeah, we lost £250,000.
£250,000 for a laugh, yes. What about malice? Do you worry about malice towards individuals?
No. Yes, of course I do.
That's pretty. Let's have a caption for that. Yeah, that's right.
Is that malicious? No, it's fond.
That's quite sweet. No, I mean, I think, again, as editor, I mean, the cartoonist just bung it out. But I think on the whole, if I can justify it, that seems reasonable enough. And the idea of a row of tulips who've turned up to meet the prince, and he going, so, how long have you been a tulip? Pretty funny.
Have you come far?
Have you come far? Thank you.
I'm
a plant, I can't move.
One of the things that we discover, though, generally, is on the whole, cartoons don't make much of a difference. I mean, it's only somebody who's incredibly thin-skinned, like Robert Maxwell, which is ironic, given the size of him, how much skin he had. Most people, you attack a politician and they want to buy the original. The most annoying person to sell an original to is Jeffrey Archer, and he's an avid collector of cartoons, and particularly ones that say he's a crook, he's a bad, terrible novelist. He just buys the lot.
That's to annoy you.
I'm sure. It works.
But presumably you can double the price, so that's kind of all right, isn't it?
Yeah, he does it through nefarious means. You get this anonymous call, and it turns out to be Jeffrey Archer.
You were saying to me before, Nick, was saying that you would not have wished to be the editor. You would not like to be the one to have to draw the lines and say, actually, that's...
I found editing this book has been fantastic because it's a chance to look at great cartoons. But it's a very, very painful process, sort of being on the boot being on the other foot and stop. I'm no longer the lamppost, but the dog. And you're having to say, this isn't going to make the cut, and that's been very hard. And particularly, we focused really on the gag cartoons because most of them are timeless. We've included some strip cartoons, which tend to be a bit more topical, but there are some great long-running strip cartoons like Hom Sap and Celeb by Petey and Taylor, and Yobs, of course, by Tony Husband. And those are sort of pretty timeless, and we've managed to get quite a lot of those in.
There is an extraordinary sort of surreal absurdists, if they were plays, they'd be terribly sort of famous and talked about. There's one in the book, which I know we don't have here. Somebody thinks I've put the batteries in my torch the wrong way round. Oh, you've got it there.
There it is.
And the torch... Now, if that was a line in a Beckett play, we'd be up here discussing it with Nicholas Heitner, not Ian Hislop. It's extraordinary, this surrealism.
If you just put that up again, sorry, Nick. That came in. I thought that was one of the funniest jokes I'd ever seen, and I put it in. I don't know who Bob is. He never contacted the magazine. He never submitted anything else. Someone out there called Bob is brilliant. That's it. That's all I know about him. And often that's the case. Cartoonists are quite anonymous. They don't appear. They don't come to London. It's not a metropolitan activity. And
the most anonymous of all was Kevin Woodcock, who was one of our greatest cartoonists. And he lived in Leicester, and he never came to the magazine, and he was once seen fleetingly the back of his head in an arena documentary about private eye cartoons. Richard Ingram's never met him. And when he died, he collected all his stuff up together and sent it to the cartoon, before he died, he sent it to the Cartoon Museum. And it included piles of invites from Private Eye to parties and gallery openings and everything, but none of which he was just incredibly shy and never wanted to put his...
But that is, I think, one of the great cartoons ever. It's about the nature of art and lots of things that would get me into Sood's Corner.
The child was right, the right perception of the child, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Woodcock's, he was very black. I mean, his cartoons had a real vein of misery, which was very, very funny. And I know that sounds awful. I mean, there would be, at Christmas, Woodcock, you'd think, oh, we'll put some Christmas jokes in the magazine. And Woodcock's would be a man goes to plug in the fairy lights and electrocutes himself. in the shape of a Christmas tree. So he's,
actually,
they were just incredibly funny.
A lot of the sort of the famous and great cliches of cartoons are people in trouble. There's the psychiatrist's couch, the desert island, the lemmings going over the cliff,
I mean, this
the
is,
man on a ledge.
This is a very familiar... I mean, it's shocking, but it's... And that's, I think, also a very good example of the fact that you don't actually have to be a brilliant draftsman to be a cartoonist. I mean, if the idea is good, you can get away with murder or something else.
Put up the Hindenburg.
Yes, but on the other hand, there's a cartoonist, Ray Lowry, who did this in the 1970s.
Drawing of the Hindenburg blowing up.
And it's... I mean, that's a fantastic piece of artwork. As is, sorry, I'm going to just do some good examples of fantastic artwork now, if this machine will work. And this, for me, is one of the most beautiful drawings I've ever seen in Private Eye. And it says, I'm sorry, Mr. Escher, but yes, you will have to fit disabled access.
But actually, I have another cartoon, an original. I can't remember who it's by now, but it is again Escher, who is starting to become one of these sort of stock images, and it just has a sad little thing. Escher dreaded bedtime. There's this miserable little character of the cartoon. It's at the bottom of my stairs, and you know, as I struggle sadly up to bed at the end of a long day, it's always there.
But the flip side of that sort of incredibly detailed Giles Pilbrow work, which is beautiful, is somebody like David Austin, who just... I mean, it's fantastic amateurism, but it belies the actual skill of the drawing. And David used to just sit down and just draw, and he didn't do a sketch, and that's what came out, and they were fantastic.
But interestingly, I mean, that's got a little sort of edge of it, of Honeysett, and there are people like Honeysett who are extraordinary draftsmen, who just do these wonderful disintegrating people who identify with very strongly.
Well, Martin Honeysett does incredibly black cartoons. It just says you agree to taking the bits home for my dog. And what's brilliant is the sort of cheeriness of the surgeon as he's... And you can imagine that there are going to be quite a few bits.
I'd say I own the original of a very important Honeysett. I don't know whether it's in the book, but it was in Private Eye, which is a very disintegrating, big wobbly woman sitting in a big chair with sort of pizza cartons and copies of Grazia magazine and empty bottles and so on. And her husband is in the doorway, just turning and saying, "And another thing, that lifestyle guru of yours is a bloody waste of money." Strong identification again. But the clever thing is, I was going to ask Nick about captions, because sometimes in that caption, it's the words "and another thing," which kind of place it, don't they?
Yes, it's sort of capturing a moment in almost sort of like coming in the middle of a sitcom, isn't it? It's sort of... I mean, so I think one of my favourite cartoonists is Larry, and he managed to work almost entirely, a bit like Kevin Woodcock, without doing any captions at all. And this is a classic Larry from the 1960s. And interestingly, Larry was, one of his biggest fans was Harpo Marx.
Yes. But they are moments, I mean, we're in a theatre here, and they're going to have some play about some bloke who strangles his wife, aren't they, later on tonight?
Yeah, very bad taste.
Yeah, but they are little frozen moments of drama, aren't they? You're coming in the middle of a story, and you're just catching a tiny little moment, and that's the cartoon. I mean, that's...
Yes, I think I put in my very pretentious introduction. The joy of it is you are thinking, well, they've observed something, frozen it, and then made it more or less sort of permanent.
What do you feel, though, as an editor, when I mentioned the cliches, the psychiatrist's couch, desert island, lemmings, ledgers, and now Escher, do you start to sort of go, oh, when a psychiatrist's couch one comes in, or are you always up for it?
No, I'm pretty much up for it. You think, oh, I've seen everything there is before. And then suddenly someone sent me a drawing of a very, very red, furious bird sitting on a psychiatrist's couch. And someone saying, so, do you feel angry bird? And I suddenly thought, well, the next generation has, you know, done the psychiatrist thing. Or there's another one of a man, there's the psychiatrist sitting there, and there's the chair there, and there's a man, furiously red, trapped inside a bottle. Just like that, exploding out, and the psychiatrist saying, I think we've got some issues, and getting out a corkscrew.
Well, that's very deep. I've felt like that in my time.
Yeah, well, I think there's always a new variant, and you know, Private Eye is nothing if not repeated jokes, with slight variations over many centuries. And I love seeing jokes again with a slight twist.
It's one of the challenges for cartoonists when we get together. Who has managed to get a desert island joke into a paper, or a man on a window ledge gag? It's a badge of honour if you've cracked it.
A serious way to talk about the problem of the decline of cartoon places to have cartoons. Private Eye is important, isn't it? Oh, the Old is quite important. The newspapers less and less.
They use fewer jokes.
Other magazines, less and less. Saga's sort of doing quite well.
It's a real problem. I mean, since the demise of Punch, which is about 11 years ago or so, a huge market for cartoons has just disappeared. So it's really only Private Eye and the Spectator and the Oldie who are now sort of, you know, keeping the torch alight.
Seems to be incredibly short-sighted, because most of the cartoonists believe that nobody buys Private Eye for anything that's written. They genuinely believe that, and they just think it should be all big cartoons with some very small captions.
And the newspapers feel they ought to have topicality, don't they? Always. Yes. So you get, I mean, some brilliant pocket cartoonists like Matt and so on, but actually just a real ordinary joke cartoon wouldn't half brighten up some of the pages.
It would, and I mean, they're not expensive. Again, given what newspapers will...
Look at his sad little face there.
And they're getting cheaper next week.
We at the Spectator party this year, our cartoonist collared Andrew Neil, who's publishing it effectively, and he was waxing lyrical about cartoons and says, "Oh, I'm a great fan of cartoons. I love cartoons. We've got to get more cartoons in the paper." And somebody said, "Well, look, if you like them so much, why don't you pay a little bit more for them? Because the rates for the Spectator remain the same for hundreds of years." And he just said, "If we pay more, will they be any funnier?"
But websites...
You could ask that about his hair.
You would think that websites would be keen on brightening themselves up by buying a cartoon. I mean, I've tried to persuade some of the BBC programme websites that they would be considerably better if they had a cartoon.
I mean, in this day and age, particularly in print journalism, I think people don't like having to pay any money at all because they're giving it in massive payoffs to former editors. And... it's true. I mean, the various newspapers I work for, they just don't want to pay.
And again, I think that's incredibly short-sighted. One of the reasons I'm sure Private Eye has been successful for so long is the quality of the cartoons. It's the fact that, you know, next week there will be a cartoon by Honeysett and one by McLaughlin and one by Nick and Ken Pine, and they will be genuinely funny. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons people do it. When we were students, Nick and I did a fake student parody mag of Punch.
Oh. Sorry, since you mentioned Ken Pine.
Oh, Ken Pine. Now, sorry. This is another of the strong veins, which is marital unhappiness.
Yes, I wonder why that is.
I was just saying that there is a belief that cartoons should be put small to fill up spaces. And I think, you know, for most readers, they'd like them a bit bigger and a few more of them. And you have to remember that as editor.
It's everybody takes the mick out of the poor old Punch, but at least they used to do full-colour pages and full-colour covers. And that's one of the... I mean, that's fantastic. When you have cartoonists of the quality of Albert, you know, who is just sort of magnificent, it is rather lovely to have them coloured up.
Well, one of the joys about doing this book is that we've had this... usually we're competing with the funny words to get the cartoons in. And we've been able to publish the McLaughlins the size that they should be published, and the colour cartoons in half a page, which you don't... I mean, in the old days...
Next week, Nick's cartoons.
But in the old days, the reason that there were full-page McLaughlins is because there wasn't that much material in the magazine. And Richard Ingram would often say, oh, well, we're a bit sort of short of material, we'll put in a big McLaughlin. And so you've got full pages, but now we're competing. We're competing with the words.
Give us another joke.
This is just a short thing about readers before we open.
Yes. This is another bad taste cartoon.
Now, we published this joke, and a number of people wrote in saying this was very, very offensive. And there was one particular letter I published, because I think it's the best letter I've ever received at Private Eye. It was on the back of this joke. A reader wrote in and said, "Dear sir, I suffer from a bipolar condition. I saw your cartoon a week ago and I thought it was absolutely disgusting. Then I looked at it again a couple of days ago and thought it was really funny." And that's a real reader, and they are just funnier than us, even than you.
Oh, the pseudo names, yeah.